Hello. So, today we're talking about developing photos. Today we're going to develop 120 photos. So 120 is medium format. You might be used, many of you, to the 35mm. 35mm is what you get. It used to be the commercial one, very small compared to 120. Look at the size difference. I don't know if you can see that, but medium format, you just get a bit, it's more towards the quality of digital, and you get different types of sizes you can shoot on it. You can either shoot on it so that it's horizontal or vertical. If you go the length of it, using certain cameras, they'll take the whole length of it, you get almost double the size image. But you get these ones called 645 cameras, which shoot the other way around, which means you get about 15 to 16 images on a roll. If you shot with the larger image, you get about 10. So you have to really decide what you want to shoot. What you need is something like this, which is a Patterson developing tank. So, interesting looking object. You just need to be able to change the film in the dark, in which case you get changing bags. And a changing bag looks like this. Don't need to be in a dark room, you just need this, which makes you work blind, but it's all part of the fun. So, I'm going to show you outside. This needs to be in a light sealed environment, so you have to do this in the changing bag. Don't do it unless you're in the changing bag. So this one's a Patterson. You can also get things called Jobos, which I have actually. So this one is a Jobo. Don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's a Jobo uni tank. So we're going to work with the Patterson, but they're essentially the same. I'm just going to tell you that the biggest difference is that on a Jobo you have a different way of winding the film in. On a Jobo, well, I can show you. So we've got this bit of spare film. This is something which was just a bit of crap I took off. So on a Jobo, you put these in here. This would be in the dark. Remember, you do it in the dark. You never do it in the light, because if you've done it in the light, you've ruined it. With a Jobo, the action is you slide it in there, reach it a little bit further, and you go, woo! Look at that, and it goes through. I'm looking at myself on the screen. So I'm going to do that one more time. So you slide it in there, and then you go with the fingers. You see these fingers? The fingers are pushing as you make that action. So I've actually taken an old reel and all that, and I've put on the negative we just saw onto one of these spools so you can see what I'm doing inside. So what I'd be doing is I'd be taking this one, once I've undone all the tape, you take it off, you do this, and then suddenly, after a little while, you just have to keep rolling it out until suddenly, this is in the bag, your negative comes out. And at that point, you can put it onto the spool. But today we're working with a Patterson. Now Patterson, take this bit off, you've got that. Take this bit out, and you get that, and you got this bit. A Patterson is a bit different. So a Patterson, you put it into there. There's a little notch in there, you just got to push it past. And then Patterson, you've got these two bits here, and you go woo, 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 and it'll just go all the way through. I kind of like Patterson more. Not sure why. I feel like it gets stuck less time. It changes sometimes, I don't know why. Sometimes I'll have a problem with it and it'll just be difficult with either one of these. One day it'll be the Patterson's just being difficult. The next day it'll be the Jobo being difficult. Half the time it's to do with humidity. If you got any water in these from the last time you developed it, if you have a tiny little bit of water, it can make the film stuck. Just realised I'm drinking a coffee. While I'm talking to you, you have the roll here, you have this one here. Make sure you have this column in when you put it into the tank. If you don't have this column in the tank, then you're letting the light in. Because the whole point about this tank is that it stops light coming in. So once the film's in there, you have no problem in terms of light leakage. So you have that, and then you have this one here. You put that one on top, and you click. And at that point, no light's coming in. This is the point where no light's coming in. So you need to make sure you click it. Click. Beautiful. This is just to stop the liquid which you're going to use coming out when you start doing this. 35mm. The only thing with 35mm is to get it out, you have to use this like a beer can on the side. Make sure you're in the dark. Never do it in the light. You take this and you'd be going like this with it, like a beer can. You pop it off. Imagine you're having some beer. Imagine you're having some beer. Pop, pop. It takes a bit of bending, and then you'll take it out, and then you have to deal with it. And then once you've wound it in, you have to snip off the end. So if it was 35mm, you'd snip this bit off like that, because this actually makes it a bit hard to put on. And I was stupid when I did this, because when I first bought this, I didn't realize you could do this. With a 35mm, you have to take this one, you twist it like that, and you push it down, and it becomes a 35mm one. Look at that. You put it onto this item, you bend it through, and you start going until it gets to the end, and then you cut it off again. So make sure you put scissors in the bag if you're using 35mm. Let's start changing the film. When it comes to 120, I don't really recommend putting 2-on-1 spool if you're new to it. It's quite a complicated process because you have to line it all up. But I'm going to put 2 on, and I may be able to tell you something about that in the future. But for you, just put the 1 on. I'm getting to the point where I can do it moderately easily. It's always the thing which actually makes the problem. And the reason why I do it is obviously to save time. But it's always the thing which causes me issues. Oh look, you can see an old one. Anyway, so I put my films in. And actually it's probably quite good to start with this all in place so you know you've got it all. So we'll kind of get this all organized again. So this white spool goes onto the black column. You put it in, seal it up. You don't need to put the lid in, which is that, but you can if you want. I never do. I don't need this, but if you're using 35mm you would. I don't need this, but if you're using 35mm you would. And you zip it up, so you've got a nice big long black zip. Do it to the very end, you do not want any light coming in. You've got some Velcro, 1, 2 and 3. On my one anyway, I don't know about yours. And you put that over there, and it just is an extra sealant. Now, what they give you is 2 hand inputs, which have double the elastic. That's just to make sure you don't get any light in. So you make sure you get in there. I used to do this with a watch on, one of those electric watches with lights, and it's always risky. I always had it on the outside, but take that off. Anyway, this is going to be boring for you. Put the lid in, you twist and you click. And then that means it's all light sealed and you can let the light in. Look, I can even risk that. Let the light in. And undo all this. And zip. Oh my God. And, ooh, there we go. And if you want to be extra careful, you can put this on. But I never do. So how are we going to develop this? That's the big question. So we get 3 formulas. When you get them shipped to you, you get them in a box, which will be concentrated, but you need to put water in them. I'm not going to show you that today, but you'll get the box and it will tell you how much you need to put the concentrate into another bottle with water. It's always different for different systems. We're using Cinestill today, so it's Cinestill Developer and Processing Chemicals. I've also used, I think, called Tenatol. That's what I've used before. So you normally get 3 formulas in there. So you have to mix them all together as it will say in the instructions, but it's quite simple. And you'll get the developer, which is this one for me. And then you'll get the Blix, which is this one. And you will get the Stabiliser. So step 1 would be to use a developer, which is going to create the image onto the negative. It does a chemical reaction and reveals it. Step 2 is the Blix, which stops that reaction, and it also stops the negative being sensitive to light. And then you have to wash it off with water. So you do about 6 minutes of just washing it, which basically gets rid of all those chemicals. And the very last thing is Stabiliser, which is like a soap from what I gather. So then you're going to need something like this, which is a tank or just anything you can pick up in IKEA, storage box, and you're going to fill this with water because this is what's going to heat the bottles. So just give it a go, don't be scared. We're going to take you on this journey. Right, you're going to need a thermometer because the aim is to try and get everything to about 39 degrees Celsius. Convert that into Fahrenheit, I'm sorry, I'm not going to bother. I tend to put my timer on while I fill this up and give it about 10 minutes on the timer before I actually start to process. That gives it enough time for everything to warm up, and put them in as it's warming up. For instance, this one, it says about 3.5 minutes if you do it at 39 degrees Celsius. If you do it at 36 degrees Celsius, it says about 6 minutes. So whilst that's happening, we're also going to take this tank and we're going to fill this with the same water, but the water is going to be at about 36 degrees Celsius. What this does is it washes it first. So there's a chemical which, if you pour it out, you see this green chemical comes out. At the same time, it also warms up this, so it makes it less likely that the temperature is going to drop inside. So as I say with this one, we're going to do this not with the stinking hot tap. We're going to try and get it to about 36 degrees. So I can guess it these days, but stick your thermometer in. So it's coming up to about 10 minutes. I'm going to take the developer and I'm just going to check to see, give it a mix just to make sure. I'm going to check to see what sort of temperature it's at. I could probably do that in about a 5-minute developing time. And you just chuck all this liquid in. Just make sure it's over the top so you can see it coming out. So you can see that liquid. And then the first step is to what they call agitate it for a minute. So if you do it properly, you get this lid on. So it's 10 minutes, we're going to say 15 minutes. This one has to get the liquid out. This is if you do it properly. You can do that. Or you also get this other option with a Patterson. You don't get this with a Jobo, but with a Patterson, you can use one of these sticks which it comes with and just twist it for a minute. So I'm going to tip it back in, take off the lid. I'm just going to gently tip it back in. Don't go too fast because it will overfill. So just gently tip it back in. So at all times, just make sure you clean this. So now you've got the Blix. Now the Blix has a bit more variation. You don't have to be so precise with the temperature. This one's going to be 8 minutes. My Cinestill one says 8 minutes no matter what it is, as long as it's around 35 degrees. Yeah, let's just do it. This chemical, the Blix, stops it developing any further, and it also makes the negative not sensitive to light anymore. And we're just going to spin it for a minute like we did the last one. Okay, so at this point, in theory, the film's been developed and the Blix has stopped it being light sensitive and stopped it developing. So we're just going to pour it back into the bottle. So at this point, it should no longer be that you need to keep it in the dark. You want to keep it in this canister still, because there's still more to do. But I just want to prove to you at this point, we shouldn't need to worry in terms of light exposure. So, I'm going to tighten this one up. We're going to put it out of the way because we've done it. Don't get confused, you don't want to pour the wrong chemical onto it. And so now, just to prove that it's no longer light sensitive, right, look at this, I can take it out. You can see there, the black shapes on it. the next stage is actually just water. So about 6 minutes of just putting water on it. So let's get this cleaned up just in case. We can even chuck that back in the water. Okay, so now we're going to get this to a temperature which is around 36 to 39 degrees. So I just leave the timer running and work it out from whatever time I see. So okay, we're going to stick it in there. Alright, so we're just going to leave this one running inside it. You could just leave it under the tap, but just make sure the sink doesn't flood up. And we're going to do 6 minutes of this, and every 20-30 seconds we're just going to pull the water out and start again. Okay, that's got to be done for now, isn't it? I think I've overdone it, to be honest. So I can stop the timer now because everything else is just a bit slower. So we're going to just turn that off. And then the very last thing is the stabilizer. It just protects the film from stuff like parasites. And this, when you put it back in, it all bubbles up. It actually tends to overflow no matter how much you put back, because the bubbles push it out like that. Look at that. So now we have this. Let's shake it out. And then take the lid off. And then we've got this one in here. Then we can take out the black column and then give it a good shake, because you want to try and get the liquid off all the big blobs before you start to hang it to dry. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hang it. So we've got these, which you get off the internet, special photographic hangers. What these do is, you see they can do more than just grip like a normal hanger. You can just click them in and it gets your negatives very firm, because you don't want your negatives to drop. As soon as you do that when they're wet, game's over. And we also want to get our squidgy. Some people say don't use this, but they're Ladites. So we're going to take this off. Whee, look at that, beautiful, lovely. And we're just going to slide this one down, not too firm. Sometimes I give it a second go, which you shouldn't really do, because you can scratch the negatives with this. So you're only doing one, remember, but I've done two because I'm a little bit more experienced than you. So we're going to hang it down there, and then we need to put a weight at the bottom. So I'm just going to do this to show you. I'm going to put a weight at the bottom. You can use something else, but I'm using one of these again. You put it on, you push down, you get that click. But you can use something like this, which is a nice rusty one, but we're going to cut it off anyway. But you can use something like a hanger, like, you know, a ball tail clip. If you didn't have this weight, it would bend and it would just become a very unscannable object. What this does is gravity lets it become a stretched out object. And then you can use an app like Photo Negative Scanner. Just have a little preview if you want to. And they look good to me. The negatives are drying, and what you'll find is they'll start to curve like this, and they'll start to bend to weird shapes as it dries. And then finally, don't get worried about that, they're going to look weird. Probably should just leave them, but they're going to look all curved and they're going to go all funny shapes, and just make sure they're a bit separated apart so that when they curve, they don't curve into each other. And then after a while, they will just return back to that straight shape. And at that point, it's almost dry. So just leave it a little bit longer, because there will still be some sort of liquid. Once it feels completely dry, which will take about an hour, maybe two, and then you're going to take them and you're going to put them in these, which are negative storage holders. And you'll obviously need a pair of scissors, and you'll need to cut them. This is what's so wonderful about it, it's still physical. You have to cut them down, ready for scanning. You might find imperfections when you scan it. You might find a bit of dust in it. You're going to edit those out. But hopefully you enjoy it and you just want to do more and more and more and more if you can find the chemicals. Bye.